Somewhere beyond the faded welcome sign for Black Hollow, where the road narrowed to a whisper and the pines pressed close like old secrets, stood a house that nobody claimed. No one remembered when it had been built. No blueprints, no records in the county archive. It wasn't on maps, but everyone in town knew it was there. It sat hunched at the end of Old Crow Road, where fog gathered thickest and the birds never sang. They called it the Hollow House, not because it was abandoned, though it surely was, but because of the way it seemed to breathe when the wind rolled through. The siding creaked like a chest inhaling. The roof gave a soft groan like an old man sighing in his sleep. And sometimes, only sometimes, if you stood very still on a windless night, you could swear you heard footsteps inside. But they never led anywhere, and they never stopped. Eleanor Muir had grown up in Black Hollow. She had left after college like most sensible people did, swearing never to come back. But life had its tides, and when her mother passed and the house became hers, Eleanor returned. Just for a little while, she told herself. Long enough to sort through boxes and memories. Long enough to ignore the Hollow House. She passed it every day on her way into town. Never changed. The iron gate still leaned at a slant, rusted through like forgotten chains. The shutters still hung unevenly, and the upstairs window, the one at the center just beneath the gable, still flickered faintly yellow some nights, even though there was no power line connected to it. She never stopped to look. Not really. Not until the third week back, when she started having the dreams. They were always the same. She stood at the edge of the Hollow House's yard. The grass was pale and brittle, like straw left too long in winter. The air was thick and still, as though it had forgotten how to move. And always there was a hum low and constant like breath or machinery. In the dream, she always walked forward, through the gate, up the path of broken stones, onto the porch where the boards gave beneath her feet. She would reach for the door and wake up. She didn't tell anyone about the dreams. Black Hollow folk weren't much for talking about old houses or bad feelings. But every time she passed the Hollow House in daylight, her steps slowed. It had a presence. Not threatening, not welcoming either. Just watching, waiting. One morning, Eleanor found an envelope wedged in her mailbox. No stamp. No return address. Just her name in neat cursive across the front. Inside, a single sheet of old paper folded 3 times. No message. Only a drawing, charcoal, rough, smudged at the edges. It was the Hollow House, and in the upstairs window a figure, small, shadowed, watching her. Eleanor stared at the drawing long after the chill of the morning air faded. She turned the paper over in her hands, checking for clues. There were none. No signature, no smudged fingerprints, not even a watermark. Just the faint scent of something old, like damp wood and iron. The figure in the window was little more than a shadow. It had no eyes, but she could feel its gaze as if the artist had trapped something alive in the charcoal. She folded the paper neatly, tucked it into a book on her shelf, and told herself it was a prank. Kids in town, maybe. A dare, a gioche. After all, the Hollow House had always been Black Hollow's favorite ghost story. But that night, when she turned off the lights and crawled into bed, she hesitated before closing her eyes. What if she dreamed again? She did. This time, the dream was quieter. She stood in the yard once more, mist rising like breath from the ground. The house loomed ahead. No birds, no wind, no sound at all. Just the steady hum, low and pulsing like something behind the walls. She climbed the steps to the porch. The door was already open. Inside, the house was darker than she remembered. Not pitch black, but full of shifting gray shadows. The walls breathed. The wallpaper pulsed like veins. She walked past rooms filled with forgotten furniture. Chairs with worn cushions, mirrors that reflected nothing, clocks that ticked backward. And then she saw the staircase. At the top, the window glowed faintly yellow. She began to climb, step by step. And just as her hand reached the banister, she woke up. The air in her bedroom was cold. Her breath clouded in the moonlight. She turned on the lamp and sat up slowly. It had felt so real this time. The sounds, the smell, the pressure of the walls. She glanced at the window and froze. There, just outside the glass, balanced on the sill, was a single feather. Black, long curled at the end. She lived alone. There were no birds. Not at night. The next day, she returned to town for groceries, but mostly for faces. The cashier at Lindell's market greeted her with a smile, but when she asked about the Hollow House, the woman's face changed. "We don't talk about that place, Han," she said gently. "Why not?" "Because it listens when you do." Eleanor blinked. "What do you mean?" But the woman only shook her head. "Best leave it alone. It's not your story to open." Eleanor left with groceries and more questions than answers. When she got back home, another envelope was waiting. No stamp. No name. Inside was a photograph. Black and white. It was of her, standing in front of the Hollow House. Only she had never taken it. And in the upstairs window, the shadow was clearer now. It was waving. Eleanor locked the front door. Not that it would help, she thought. She stared at the photograph for a long time, studying the grain, the angle, the way her coat looked exactly as it had the day before. It wasn't old. It wasn't faked. It was recent, within the last 24 hours. Which meant someone had followed her, taken her picture, and left it for her to find. She looked again at the shadow in the window. It was taller now, more distinct, and that wave, it wasn't friendly. It looked more like a summons. That night, she didn't sleep. Instead, she made tea and sat by the window, watching the edge of the trees where the Hollow House waited. And sometime past 3 in the morning, she saw the upstairs light flicker on. Not fast, not flashing, just pulsing, as if something behind the curtain was thinking, or breathing. She watched until sunrise. The next morning, Eleanor opened her mother's old trunk. Beneath handkerchiefs and faded postcards, she found the town's historical book, one her mother had helped write as part of a local project. It included maps, black and white photos, a few myths. She flipped to the oldest section, Unsettled Sites of Black Hollow. There was no mention of the Hollow House by name. But on one page, half-torn and brittle, was a sketch. A house, same shape, same window. The caption read, "Built upon the buried chapel, 1846. Raised by fire, 1851. Nothing remains." Eleanor ran her finger along the drawing. But something did remain. The house stood there still. She decided to go back. She wasn't sure why. Maybe the dreams, maybe the photograph, maybe the part of her that had always been drawn to mysteries no one else would face. She packed a flashlight, her phone, though she knew there would be no signal, and a small silver locket her mother used to wear. A charm, maybe. It was late afternoon when she reached the gate. The wind had stilled. The trees were silent. The iron gate opened at her touch. The porch groaned beneath her weight. The front door, like in her dreams, was already ajar. Inside, the house smelled like ash and time. Not the sharp smell of fire, but the lingering scent of old things left too long in the dark. Dust lay heavy on the floor, yet her footsteps left no trail. She passed into the parlor. Chairs draped in white cloths. A piano missing half its keys. A mirror so tarnished it only reflected shadows. She listened. Silence. Then, a soft creak overhead. Someone, or something, moving upstairs. She should have left. She walked toward the staircase instead. The same one from the dream. The same yellow glow at the top. The hallway above was narrower than it should have been. The walls curved slightly inward, and the wallpaper had patterns that seemed to move when she wasn't looking directly at them. There were doors on either side, each one shut tight. Except the last. The room with the glowing window. She stepped inside. It was empty, just a rocking chair, and a small, open book lying on the floor. She picked it up. The pages were blank, except one. Scrawled in ink, in a familiar hand, were the words, "You came back." She dropped the book, and the rocking chair began to move, slowly, back and forth, and the window behind it, the glowing yellow light, went dark. Eleanor stood frozen in the dim light, the creaking of the rocking chair steady and slow, too slow for wind, too rhythmic for chance, back and forth. back and forth. She took a step back, and the chair stopped. Silence poured in like water. Then a knock, but not at the front door, came from below. 3 soft, deliberate raps. She should have left. Any sensible person would have. But Eleanor had lived too long with unanswered questions. The photograph, the dreams, the note in her mother's handwriting. They all led here. The knock came again. Lower, beneath the floorboards. She turned on her flashlight and scanned the room. The wooden planks beneath her feet were warped, but one in the corner was slightly raised, as if pried up before. She knelt, slid her fingers underneath, and lifted. It gave with a sigh of damp air. A square opening revealed a narrow ladder leading down into complete darkness. The hum returned, low, pulsing, steady. The same hum from the dreams. She swallowed, slipped the locket around her neck, and began to descend. The ladder ended in a room that shouldn't exist. The space was far too large, far below the footprint of the house above. It was dry, lined with stone, and faintly illuminated by strands of some bioluminescent moss that clung to the walls in long, thread-like veins. The hum was stronger here. There were no furnishings.
No dust. No dica.
Only walls covered in writing. Hundreds, maybe thousands, of lines etched in ink, chalk, even scratched in with fingernails. All in different handwriting, but all repeating the same phrase. The house remembers. Over and over in looping spirals and jagged slashes. Eleanor moved deeper. In the center of the room sat a single item, an antique phonograph. Its horn gleamed as though freshly polished, though the table it rested on was cracked and water-stained. She hesitated, then turned the crank. The machine hissed to life. A man's voice crackled through the static, calm, precise, yet distant, like a voice sent across time. To those who listen, I am sorry. The hollow house cannot be undone. It does not feed on blood or fear. It feeds on memory, on presence. Once seen, it sees back. Once entered, you belong. It will begin again with you. The recording stopped. The hum grew louder. Behind her, something shifted in the dark. She spun around, shining her flashlight. Nothing. Then a soft voice whispered beside her ear. You're awake now. She ran. Up the ladder. Through the glowing hallway. Down the stairs. Out the door. She didn't stop until she was home. That night she didn't sleep. She sat up in bed. Lights on. Eyes on the window. At midnight her phone buzzed. A single notification. New photo added. Her fingers trembled as she opened the gallery. The image showed her sitting in bed, just as she was now. Only, in the photo, the door behind her was open. And someone was standing in the doorway. Someone tall, with no face, and the same faint glow behind them, like candlelight behind gauze. The phone slipped from Eleanor's hand, landing with a soft thud on the quilt. Her breath caught in her chest as she stared at the doorway, her real doorway, not the one in the photo. It was closed, locked, but still she couldn't look away from it. Not for a long while. When she finally dared to retrieve the phone, the photo was gone. Vanished from her gallery without a trace. No metadata, no recent files, nothing in the cloud. It was as if it had never been there. Except she remembered. And the house. It remembered too. In the days that followed, time took on a strange quality. She couldn't tell if she was sleeping or dreaming. She would wake in unfamiliar rooms of her own house. The walls creaked in unfamiliar rhythms. Mirrors no longer reflected exactly what they should. Her reflection would blink out of sync, smile too late, or look behind her when she stood still. Each morning, a new envelope would appear on her doorstep, always unmarked. Inside drawings, photos, short, scrawled messages. You lived here once. The house is waking. She remembers you. And once, the room will open when you sleep. That night, Eleanor set up cameras around her home, borrowed equipment from a friend in town, citing research, history, curiosity. She pointed one at her bed, another at the hallway, a third at the front door. Then she went to sleep. In her dream, she was not herself. She was younger, a child, maybe 7, walking barefoot across wooden floorboards in the hollow house. The wallpaper was floral, but faded. A woman sang in the kitchen, soft and distant, a lullaby in a language she didn't know. The child stopped in front of a mirror. The reflection did not match. The girl in the glass looked frightened. Her mouth moved, but no sound came. Then the hallway behind the reflection began to burn. Quietly, without smoke. Flames that licked the edges of memory, not wood. The girl in the mirror mouthed one word. Run. Eleanor awoke in her living room. The lights were off. The clock read 3:33 a.m. All the cameras were off. Each screen displayed a black void except one. The one aimed at the front door showed movement. A figure, pale and slow-moving, had stood watching the house for 12 minutes. His face was entirely blurred, like static. Its outline shimmered, as though not entirely here. At the very end of the clip, it raised one arm, not to wave, to point, at the camera. Then, it turned and walked into the woods. That day, Eleanor visited the town archives. She requested old blueprints, maps, and records, but no documents referenced a house at the forest's edge. Not before 1851, not after, but the old clerk, a thin man with watery eyes, paused when she asked. "The hollow house?" he said, almost whispering. "You've been inside?" She nodded. He looked down, then said, "There are 2 versions of the town. The one you live in, and the one that remembers." "What does that mean?" He slid a folded piece of paper across the desk. On it was a map, one road leading to the forest. Marked in red ink, "House exists on both sides." That night, Eleanor dreamed again. But this time she wasn't in the house. She was beneath it, the stone room, the glowing veins, and a door she hadn't seen before. Round, iron-bound, sealed with wax. A voice spoke behind her, not frightening, not cruel, just sad. "You brought the key." Her hand moved. She held the locket, pulsed with faint heat. She stepped forward and placed it against the iron. The wax melted. The door opened, and a whisper of cold air escaped, carrying voices that sounded like her own. Memories lost, spoken back to her. She stepped through, and woke up in bed. But not her bed. Eleanor sat up. The sheets were crisp. The air carried the scent of dried roses and candle wax. The wallpaper, deep green with gold accents, was nothing like the floral paper in her own room. This wasn't her house, but it wasn't quite the hollow house either. It felt like a reconstruction of something, a memory of a room made solid. And it was eerily perfect. Nothing decayed, no dust, no age. The light came from oil lamps. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, though the hands moved counterclockwise. She stood and crossed to the window. Outside, the forest, but the trees swayed backward, as if time moved in reverse. Behind her, the bed creaked. She turned. There was a child sitting there, 7 years old, the same age as the girl in the dream mirror. The child didn't speak, just stared, pale, watchful. Eleanor stepped closer. "What is this place?" The girl finally spoke, her voice soft and impossibly familiar. "You left me here." Eleanor backed away, but the walls of the room were growing, stretching upward, closing in. The air thickened, the lights dimmed. She reached for the door, only to find that there was no door, just bookshelves, full of thick, leather-bound volumes. None had titles, but each one bore her initials. She pulled one free. Inside, a written memory, her handwriting, her first day of school. She opened another, her father's funeral, and another, a dream she had forgotten about a black river that spoke. Dozens of her memories catalogued, bound. Then, a book that felt heavier than the rest. The only one that was warm to the touch. On the spine, "The day you shouldn't remember." She opened it, and the room changed. The walls vanished. The ceiling cracked. Books flew from shelves like startled birds. She was back in the hollow house, but not as it was. It was burning. The flames roared without heat. The air shook with voices. A dozen figures stood around her, blurred, faceless, watching. A voice boomed from the center of the house. Not angry, not malicious, but vast. You opened the door. You remembered what was buried. Eleanor tried to run, but her legs refused. A shape approached from the smoke. Tall, familiar. It held something in its hands. A book, her book, and it opened its mouth. But instead of words, the hum, that deep, endless, bone-level hum, it swallowed the air, the flames, the figures, her. She awoke on the floor of her own kitchen. The locket around her neck was ice cold, and in front of her, a new photograph. This one showed the library room, the books, the burning, but it was taken from behind her, as if someone or something had been standing there with her, watching her live the memory. The back of the photo read, "Memory is the mother of ghosts." The morning air carried a metallic tang, as if it had rained somewhere nearby, yet the ground was bone dry. Eleanor sat on the kitchen floor long after the sun came up, the photograph clutched in her hands. It trembled slightly, though not from her grip, from within, like it was breathing. She placed it gently on the counter, careful not to look at it too long. She needed answers, not dreams, not warnings, truth. So she returned to the archives. The clerk was not there. In his place, a tall man with a narrow face and gray-gloved hands stood behind the counter. His suit looked out of place, too formal, too pressed. His eyes, a pale amber, followed her without blinking. "I'm looking for house records," Eleanor said, voice steadier than she expected. "The Hollow House." The man smiled faintly. "I assumed as much. You've been marked by it." She froze. "Marked?" He stepped aside, gesturing to a side door that hadn't been there before. "Come. It's time." The room beyond was impossibly large, much bigger than the entire archive building. Rows upon rows of shelves stretched into fog. Not mist. Fog. Thick, damp, and cold. The shelves were filled not with books, but with jars. Each one labeled, each one pulsing with light. Some glowed softly, amber, green, blue. Others flickered like candles caught in a storm. A few were completely dark. Eleanor stared, confused. "What is this place?" The man's gloved hand brushed across a shelf. "This is where memory is kept. Not written memory, living memory. Stories the house collects." He stopped and pulled down a jar. Inside was a small scene, a perfect recreation of a room. Her old bedroom when she was 12. A younger version of her sat on the bed, drawing. "You lived this moment," he said. "But now the house does too." He handed her another. Inside, her mother, humming at the stove, bathed in morning light. Then another. Her father in his study, whispering to someone Eleanor had never seen. Then, one she didn't recognize. A dark hallway, candles, and herself, much older, walking toward a door that didn't exist yet. She looked at the man. "I haven't lived this." He nodded. "You will." They walked deeper into the fog. "I'm not the first, am I?" she asked. "No," he said. "But you're the first in a long time who remembers after waking." They stopped before a massive jar at the farthest shelf. Pulsed red. Inside was the hollow house, alive, breathing. Its walls pulsed like a lung. Its eyes, windows, blinked slowly. Eleanor could hear faint whispers leaking from its glass walls. "What happens if it breaks?" she asked. The man didn't answer. He merely turned to her, removed one gray glove, and handed her a key. "I am the archivist. My role is only to show you the shelves. What do I do now?" His smile was tired. "You finished the story." That night, Eleanor returned to the house. She didn't sneak. She walked boldly up the broken stone steps. The door opened for her. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of candle wax and smoke. The walls pulsed faintly, like veins under old skin. In the center of the foyer, a staircase spiraled downward. One she'd never seen before. The key in her pocket burned softly. With a final breath, she began to descend. The staircase spiraled downward, deeper than should have been possible beneath the hollow house. The walls bled away from wood to stone, then to something else entirely, dark, root-veined, pulsing with a quiet throb, like the beat of a heart too far away to hear clearly. Eleanor's hand never left the key in her pocket. She counted her steps at first, trying to stay grounded, but somewhere past 100, the air changed. It no longer smelled of dust or decay. It smelled of memory, childhood perfume, ash from the hearth the winter her father died, salt from her tears the day she ran from home. Every scent dragged her back, until time no longer mattered. Finally, the stairs ended, and she found herself in the room beneath. It was vast, circular, with a ceiling so high it vanished into shadow. Candles burned in sconces shaped like reaching hands. And in the center, a mirror. Not glass, not silver, but liquid. The surface shimmered, still and waiting. The hum returned, deep now and layered. Not one voice, but many, overlapping. They didn't speak words. They spoke remembering. Eleanor stepped closer. The surface rippled. A figure formed. Not a ghost. Not exactly. It was her mother. Not as she'd last seen her, but young. The way she looked in photographs Eleanor hadn't seen in years. The mirror showed her sitting in a garden, laughing. Then her father, kneeling beside her, offering a dandelion. Then Eleanor herself, a baby in her mother's arms. More images, rapid now. A birthday, a scar, a lost toy, a secret.
Moments voria, forgotten.
But not by the house. The house had kept them all, stored them, loved them. Eleanor reached out to touch the surface, and it took her. She did not fall. She floated through layers of herself, through the echoes of every door she had ever opened or closed. She drifted past memories not her own. A man hiding beneath floorboards during a storm in 1914. A girl in 1846, painting a raven on the ceiling in her sleep. A midwife in 1780, whispering to the walls. All of them had lived near or within the hollow house, and the house had kept them. All of them. The key pulsed in her pocket again. Then she landed. She stood in a perfect replica of her childhood bedroom. But this one was different. The windows looked out into black. The clock ticked forward and backward, like it couldn't decide. And on the bed, the younger version of herself. The 7-year-old. The one who had first opened the wrong door. The one who had never quite closed it. This version looked up at her with wide eyes. "You forgot me," the child said. Eleanor knelt, tears stinging. "I didn't mean to. You promised to remember." "I do now." A long silence. The girl stood and placed something in Eleanor's hand. The locket. But now it was glowing. The child looked at her with a sad smile. "You can end it, or keep it." The mirror appeared again. Inside, the hollow house stood. Not ruined. Whole. Alive. A beacon in a sea of forgotten things. She understood now. It wasn't a curse. It was a vessel. For lost moments. For grief. For lives untethered from time. A memory house. And it was tired. So very tired. Eleanor took the key. Walked to the door that formed before her. The final door. It was marked with a single phrase. "Here lies the last forgetting." She turned the key. The door opened. Light filled the mirror. She awoke in her own bed. Sunlight streamed through the window. The house was quiet.
No whisper.
The hollow house was gone. A patch of field grew where it once stood. The grass untouched, wildflowers blooming. No one in town remembered it. No records, no stories, only Eleanor, because the house had given her a choice. To keep the weight of memory, or let it sleep. She had chosen to carry it. And so, some nights, when the wind blows just right, Eleanor walks to the edge of the field and places a stone on the earth. A marker, not a grave, a memory, because the hollow house may be gone, but it remembers. Still, always. Years passed. The town of Windermere changed, as towns do. New roads, new families, The bakery changed hands. The old post office became a cafe. But at the edge of town, the field remained untouched. Children ran past it on bicycles. Dogs barked at the wind there. No one built on it. No one planted crops. Simply remained. Eleanor lived in a cottage nearby. Quiet, peaceful. Her garden overflowed with thyme and lavender. Her bookshelves were filled with blank journals she never wrote in, but always kept. On moonlit nights, she would sit on her porch with a mug of tea, gaze toward the empty space where the hollow house once stood, and smile. Sometimes, she swore she heard music. Other times, a whisper, no louder than a leaf brushing stone. She never feared it, because she knew what it was. Not a ghost, not a curse, just memory, alive, waiting to be loved, waiting to be held. And so, she held it, night after night, in silence, in peace, until sleep came gentle and whole, and the field whispered its stories to the stars.